right. Good morning. Welcome back to Charlotte Street Computers Training. I'm Tom, and today our topic is iCloud, Apple's service for synchronizing your devices, and doing a lot of other things as well. So usually I actually start this class by asking the question, what is the cloud for? I just kind of gave it away actually with something I just said, and almost all the time I get the first answer is storage. And so the cloud does actually store our things, but I would venture to say that storage is not the primary reason that we have volunteered our data to these other companies. And I think it goes back to 15 or more years ago when most of us had one device where we kept all of our things. And we could back up that one device and have it nice in our own possession and everything. But then in 2007 especially, smartphones existed before 2007, but in 2007 the iPhone came out and really accelerated things. This introduced a problem for us because now we've got two devices that we use on a regular basis that have our data on it. And that data isn't static. We're making new calendar appointments. We're adding new contacts to our address book. We're creating new documents. We're taking new pictures. So we would take a cable and we would hook up the iPhone or the other kinds of smartphones up from our phone to our computer. We'd go into some program and press sync, and until the next time we do that again, we would potentially be out of sync as we're creating new things. So it was kind of a daily or weekly or monthly process where you would have to do the syncing. And then in 2010, matters got even more complicated, or worse if you could look at it that way, with the introduction of tablets. And Apple introduced the iPad in 2010. And now we've got a third device. So shortly after that, Apple introduced this service that they call iCloud to solve the issue of keeping these things in sync. And so it just so happens that the internet had the previous decade had been getting faster and faster, and so that made it possible to consider the central location that we would keep our data would actually be somewhere besides in our own possession. And the advantage of that is that it would be available to us no matter where we go. If we're out and about with our phones and we make a change, by the time we get back home, that change has already happened to our Mac and our iPad. So we are going to be focusing on the Apple part of the cloud today, but I do want to mention, just for one slide here, I want to mention some other players in this. And in the class I usually ask the question, how many of you have a Gmail address? And usually about half the class will raise their hand at least. And so, of course, Gmail is by Google, and Google has pretty much everything they do is cloud-based. And so they've got, of course, your Gmail, they've got Google Photos, they've got Google Drive, where they keep Google Docs, Word sheets, documents, and presentations. Google Calendar. And you can synchronize bookmarks through Google Chrome. Sometimes, the reason I'm bringing this up is sometimes people think they've got an iCloud problem when in fact they just haven't signed in to their Google account on all three of their devices. So, or maybe they've made the default calendar, the one that when they just make a new event on two of their devices, the default calendar is the Google Calendar. On their Mac, the default calendar is their Apple Calendar. And so the events are not showing up on one device or another. There's also another big player called Microsoft. Most of you are familiar with Microsoft. You can actually do Word, Excel, and PowerPoint in the cloud now. They provide, with their subscription service, they provide 1 terabyte of storage in their system called OneDrive. And then there's just a host of other cloud services. I'm just going to use Dropbox as an example of that. Dropbox did a great job early on, I would say, as I remember them as signing up for them as early as 2005, and being able to access your documents from all your different kinds of devices, not just Apple devices or Windows devices, but being able to access your things from all the different kinds of platforms that you might need to access. So anyway, we are going to be focusing on Apple's version of the cloud today, but I just wanted to do a quick mention of that. It's called iCloud. Just one quick note, you do have, for this to work properly, you do have to be using the same Apple ID on all your devices. So that's a very no-brainer statement, but we have run into some people that have multiple Apple IDs, and that's okay to have multiple Apple IDs, but for this to work, it has to be you have to be logged into iCloud with the same exact Apple ID. So this came out in late 2011, in the fall of 2011, with iOS 5 on the iPhone and the iPad, and macOS, I think they just call it OS 10, Lion, back in 2011. So, and it had a fairly modest set of things that it did for us. If you signed up for the new iCloud.com email address, then Apple would be in charge of your email. Everybody got calendar syncing, contact syncing, Safari bookmark syncing. The little icon with the flower on it on the left is the original Photos app icon on the iPhone and iPad, and on the Mac it was iPhoto. So a little bit of syncing there. And then Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, Apple's productivity apps, they also did syncing. So they were the first documents to sync between our devices were the Apple iWork apps. Also, they introduced backup. So backup not to the Mac so much, but to the iPad and the iPhone. They made it possible for the first time to back up your iOS devices to somewhere besides your own computer. This was very liberating for people that didn't have a computer. It was actually very difficult to own an iPad in that first year and a half, from April of 2010 to the fall of 2011, because you couldn't back up your iPad and you couldn't do updates from, it started with iOS 3 on the iPad. You couldn't get the upgrade to iOS 4 unless you plugged in that iPad to a computer and ran the update process there. So kind of along with the release of iCloud and the backups on iCloud, Apple allowed the iPhone and the iPad to start doing their own updates without having to be plugged into a computer to do it. So each year they've been adding things to this. iOS 6 and macOS 10 Lion added a little bit more to their photos system. We're going to spend a whole class on that, usually the following week. So next Thursday we'll be doing a class on iCloud Photos. They also introduced reminders on the Mac. I think it had been on the iPhone and iPad for a little while, but it wasn't really something that was syncing through the cloud. And so they added that app to the Mac and tied things together with the cloud. So what that did for us is it allows us to use something like Siri, or even you could go into the calendar app if you want to, but it makes it super easy. And I'm just going to switch over to the iPad for just a sec. And I'm just going to press and hold my home button here. Remind me to wrap up in 1 hour.
Done.
All right, so that reminder has just gone up to the cloud, and it will then come down to my other devices. Sometimes the small things, the little things that seem like nothing, are the ones that you use the most. And again, they did enhance photos that following year. So each year, again, they've been adding additional things. So in iOS 7 and macOS 10 Mavericks, we got the addition of books, or originally it was called iBooks, to the Mac. And what Apple did in iBooks is they, besides the synchronization of reading books, buying books from Apple, synchronizing where you were in the book, they added PDF syncing. And so you could store PDF documents in the Books app or the iBooks app, and that would synchronize to all your devices. So it gave us something besides the pages, numbers, and Keynote. They also introduced, you'll see a little key in the cloud there on the left and the keychain on the right. They introduced the Keychain, our password syncing. And I personally didn't do this at the beginning because my devices weren't as secure. I didn't have the fingerprint reader on my phone, so I had to type in a passcode every time, and I made the passcode delay so I didn't have to type it in every 2 minutes. So I didn't feel secure enough to do this. But now, as the devices have come along with the fingerprint readers and the Face ID, the Mac laptops now have fingerprint readers on them. It makes it more secure to be able to do this password syncing through the cloud. So this is an option of something that you can turn on in iCloud. Also, I'm just going to make my face go away for a second here. Apple has made it possible to do some of the syncing through Windows. So there's an iCloud control panel that has been downloadable for a number of years, actually I think since the very beginning, so that if you own an iPhone and an iPad but not a Mac, you could do some of this syncing through Windows. So anyway, let's move on a little bit here. That was the year that all the icons changed. Everybody freaked out on the change of icons. 2014, with macOS Yosemite, iOS 8, we got a new feature called iCloud Drive. The best way I can describe this for some of you is that this was Apple beginning to step in the territory of Dropbox. And so this provided a folder on the Mac where we could save a file, and that file, no matter what kind of file it is, it didn't have to be a pages, numbers, and Keynote document or a PDF document. It could be anything. And it would synchronize to the cloud, be available to other Macs. Unfortunately, for that first year, it wasn't available to access those documents on the iPhone and the iPad. But sometimes these things, when they start out, it takes a little time for momentum to gather. And a part of that iCloud Drive was a feature called MailDrop, and that allows you to send very large attachments, up to 5 gigabytes on the Mac and up to 1 terabyte on iPhones and iPads. Very large attachments through email. And so if it's too big, it will upload that attachment to the cloud. It will send your recipient a link to that item that will remain active for 30 days. And they can just click the link and download the item. So your email won't get rejected. All right, big enhancement to Photos that year. Apple actually did away with the iPhoto app, and they redesigned things from the ground up to do a complete syncing of your photo library. We're going to be discussing that in detail next week. iOS 9 and macOS 10, I think that would have been El Capitan, added an icon to the iPhone and the iPad for iCloud. So finally, those documents that we'd been saving in that spot on the Mac for a year were available in the iCloud app to see those documents. And to me, that was quite a liberating thing for the iPad, because it's been, it had been painted by Apple as a potential replacement for the computer, but there really wasn't a place where you could save files except for each individual app. So this iCloud app filled in the spot of that place where you could save things, kind of like the Finder on a Mac. Apple did a lot of work on Notes in iOS 9, and they've continued to do work on that. But up until this time, the only way you could access the advanced features of Notes was to have an iCloud.com email address. And so if you tried to turn on the note syncing, you wouldn't be allowed to do that unless you had iCloud.com as an email address. So in iOS 9 and El Capitan here, they made the advanced features that they had been working on in Notes available to everyone. Anyway, they've now got like password protection for Notes. You can draw on them with the iPads. You can share your notes with other people. things like that. So becoming a very robust note-taking app. All right, iOS 10 and macOS Sierra added a thing that they call the Universal Clipboard. This is the clipboard's been around for decades. I remember it even from my earliest classes in DOS back in the early 90s. There's the feature where you copy something from one document and then you go paste it into another document. And the invisible place that it goes to in between those two commands is the clipboard. And the clipboard has always, up until this point, been a place on the device that you're using. And so this universal clipboard basically means that you can copy something on one device and then paste it onto another one of your devices. You could copy a photo on your phone and paste it into a document on your Mac. So anyway, they also it made it possible to turn on a feature called Desktop and Documents. And so up until this time, if you wanted a document to synchronize with your other devices, you had to save it specifically into the iCloud folder. And you know, that's just not the natural place that most of us want to save our things. You know, I save most of my things in two places. The desktop folder, which is just on the desktop of my the pretty picture on my Mac. I save folders and files there. Excuse me. And then the documents folder. So with one checkbox in Sierra, you could choose to have those two places automatically backed up to the cloud. And it would synchronize not just with another Mac, but also with your iPhone and iPad. So the documents that you have in those two places would be available to you basically no matter where you are with any of your three devices there. All right. Also on iOS 10, on the iPhone and the iPad, an app showed up called the Home app. And this basically became a place to kind of pull together the smart devices that had been cropping up as a category of things to get for your home. Smart locks, smart thermostats, smart lights, smart doorbells and cameras. And you know, these devices were made by a multitude of companies, and up until this time on the Mac and Apple platforms, you had to have an app for your lock, and an app for your thermostat, and an app for your doorbell light, and an app for your light. So anyway, this brought all those things together in one place, and you could even daisy chain commands. So you could say, "Good morning, Siri," and it would raise your smart blinds and turn the thermostat up and unlock your door and turn some lights on or turn some lights off. So you could do all these commands. And so iOS 10 brought that to the iPhone and the iPad. Let's see here, iOS 11, and I'm gonna, let's see, where can I put my picture here? We're getting running. I want to talk about. Let's see, we'll move me up and maybe move me over. iOS 11 and macOS High Sierra brought some new things for us. They brought, for the iCloud system, they brought file sharing, individual files we could share with other people. Dropbox have been doing this for over a decade, but we finally got that in iCloud Drive. And along with that, something that's kind of important to know about if you're using the iCloud Drive or the Desktop and Documents feature is a thing called Unified Trash, which basically means if you delete a document on one device, that document is going away everywhere. So don't think you can get rid of it on your phone because you've got it on your Mac if you're using those features, because it will also delete it off of the Mac. There's some synchronization that can happen with Siri. the things that Siri learns about you on one device, it sends in an encrypted way to your other devices through the cloud. So it's not information that Apple's storing on their systems. They tell us. So if Siri learns that I get up and go to work every day at 9 o'clock, it might start telling me that traffic is light from here to that location before I even get in the car and start thinking about that. Or, you might want to take another route because traffic is heavy. Messages. So text messages have been around on smartphones for a long time. They're associated with your phone number typically. iCloud had been making it available to synchronize or have your phone pass off a text message from itself to one of your other devices, or both of your devices, or all of your devices when they're nearby. But in iOS 11 and High Sierra, they gave us a button in the iCloud settings where we could actually back up our text messages to iCloud and not have those text messages be just kept by the phone company that we're with. So this allows our text messages to be in perfect sync even when they're not close to each other. And it's supposed to mean that if we delete a message on one device, it will be deleted on all of our devices. It makes it particularly easy to move from an old phone to a new phone because you don't actually have to restore from a backup. You can just sign into an iCloud account and all those text messages will come down. And that's not just true of phones, but just signing into a new Mac or signing into a new iPad. All your text messages will come flooding in with the account if you've turned that feature on. All right, on the iPhone and iPad and iOS 11, they replaced the iCloud app. Shouldn't really say replaced it. They just put something around it called the Files app. iCloud Drive is still inside the Files app, but the icon that would be on your home screen of your iPhone and iPad for iCloud is no longer there. It's inside this file folder app. And the idea here is that you could also sign in to other services that you might have. I mean, as much as we'd like to keep things in one service, some of us don't have the luxury of doing that, where if you're involved in a company that uses Dropbox, you've got to have the Dropbox app. If you're on a company that uses Google Drive, you have to have the Google Drive app installed on your devices. So, if your company is Microsoft Office based, you need the OneDrive app installed. So this Files app actually made it possible to actually kind of pull all those things, kind of like the Home app did for smart devices made by different companies. This made it possible to bring together in one place all the files that we might have on our devices, and you could easily copy a file from let's say from your Dropbox account to your Google Drive account, or your Google Drive account to your iCloud account. So it gave us one place to kind of manage all of our files. All right. Also, something that showed up on iOS 11 on our iPhone and iPad is the News app. It's basically a headline gathering service that Apple has started providing, and you get to choose actually, what does this have to do with iCloud? The fact that you get to choose on one of your devices what news services, CNN, Fox News, Popular Science, Mac rumor websites, and things like that. You can pick the services and the topics that you're interested in, and those selections will get synchronized through the cloud to your other devices, so you don't have to go through that whole selection process multiple times. So anyway, for a year that was only available on the iPhone and the iPad. When iOS 12 came out and Mojave on the Mac, they brought that news service to the Mac. They also brought the Home app to the Mac. And they brought two apps that have been available for, I think, since the inception of the iPhone, the Stocks app and the Voice Memos app. They've been available on the iPhone since as long as I can remember, maybe since 2007. I didn't get an iPhone that first year. So, but anyway, those were only available on the iPhone. So what they did with iOS 12 was they added the Voice Memos app to the iPad, and with macOS Mojave, they added it to the Mac. And they added syncing between the devices available through the cloud. So if you make a voice memo on one device, you're going to find that voice memo on all your devices. I think we've got a new, oh, there we go, iOS 13. So I've updated the slideshow a little bit for iOS 13 finally, and macOS Catalina. And one of the things we just recently got, this didn't actually happen in the fall with the rollout of iOS 13 and Catalina, it just actually happened a couple of weeks ago, is the ability to share folders with iCloud Drive. So we've had for a few years the ability to share one document with other people. Now we can actually share a whole folder with other people that are using these newer operating systems. So anyway, I'm already using that between a couple of different, my work account and my home account. If there's a folder that I've been working on at home, I can actually share it with my work account or share it with another person if I need to. A lot of time spent there talking about all the things that iCloud does. Now we're actually going to jump in and demonstrate where to go do this. So I'm going to get out of the slideshow on my Mac, and we'll also be switching over to the iPad in just a moment, which kind of represents the iPhone as well. But I'm going to do the Mac first, and so we're going to come over here to the Apple and just come down to System Preferences. It's also the icon with the gear if you happen to have the System Preferences icon in your dock. And in Catalina, they have moved iCloud. So I am using the latest operating system on this Mac here, Catalina. And one of the changes they made in Catalina was they have moved the iCloud icon into the Apple ID icon. There is no Apple ID icon on Mojave or any operating system earlier. You would have had an iCloud account somewhere in the third row, first item. And so anyway, it's now been moved to the top inside the Apple ID. Here's all the things that, well, not all of the things, most of the things I've been talking about. On the Mac, some of the things that that get synchronized through the cloud you have to do separately. Just for example, if you want to synchronize your messages, you would open the Messages app and you would come up to the Messages menu, come down to Preferences, and you would check the box that says Enable Messages in the Cloud. On the iPhone and iPad, we'll actually find a little button to turn that feature on in the big list of things. Up at the very top, you see my iCloud Drive, and it's got a separate Options button. So when I click that, here's that option for turning on Desktop and Documents, which would start backing up all these documents on my desktop to the cloud. The only reason Johnny Appleseed hasn't done that is that's going to push him up into a different tier of service from Apple. And so this is something I haven't actually brought up yet in the presentation, but Apple gives us 5 gigabytes of storage for free, which is not really a lot. I mean, when they rolled this out in 2011, it seemed generous, but you know, almost 10 years later, it's looking like a fairly small amount. But the good news is the next step up, which is 10 times that amount of storage, is 99 cents a month. So you can get 50 gigabytes for backing up your phone and for your iPad and for storing your pictures and things like that for basically $12 a year. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click done here. Something that's new in Catalina is the removal of the Options button for Photos. That has actually been moved to the Photos app as well. So if you come down to your Photos app and go to the Photos menu, there will be an iCloud option there, General and iCloud, and you'll have 2 options. They've removed an option called My Photos from Catalina. And so anyway, we're going to be talking about this in detail next week, so I'm not going to go into that right now. But just another point of something that's been removed from this panel here and put into the app itself. So anyway, you get to decide if there's something that you don't want to have happen. So for instance, Johnny Appleseed does not want to synchronize his passwords. He has that unchecked. He doesn't have any stock portfolio that he needs to synchronize with the different apps, so he has that unchecked. Anyway, you get to decide. I'm going to switch over to the iPad and actually go to the the Settings app, and again at the very top, your name here, and over inside of that, in this Apple ID section, so they're trying to make the Mac more consistent with this experience, tap iCloud, and here are the different buttons for all those different services, and actually some third-party things down below. So it is possible for third-party apps, if you've installed them, to synchronize some of your data between your devices using the iCloud service at the very bottom here. But here's all the things I've been talking about. Here's the iCloud backup. So this is not something that you'll find on the Mac. It's unique to the iPad and the iPhone, and so you can actually do complete backups of your iPhone and your iPad in the cloud. And so if something happens to your device, at least you don't lose your data as well. It's that simple. You can just come in, you sign in, you decide which things you want to synchronize, and all the magic starts happening. So anything else I need to tell you? Switch back to the Mac, and I just want to show you also in the Mail app, that feature I talked about called MailDrop, you actually have to access from the preferences of Mail. And you go to the Accounts section, and for each email that you have, you need to check the box that says Send Large Attachments with MailDrop. So if you have a Gmail address and an iCloud address or Charter or whatever, if you want that email service to be able to use the MailDrop feature, you have to check the box Send Large Attachments with MailDrop for that to work. All right, I think we're going to move on to another slide in the slideshow. I want to talk about another aspect of the cloud. That is, actually, let me just throw this in there. We kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the slideshow. This is a Windows iCloud control panel. Obviously on a Mac, all this is baked into the Mac operating system. Windows, it isn't, because it's an Apple product, not a Microsoft product. So Apple's made it possible for you to go to their website at iCloud.com and download this iCloud control panel, and then you get some of the features that we've been talking about. Not all of them, but some of the features integrated into your PC. So the iCloud Drive feature will work. All the photos that you've been taking on your iPhone and iPad can synchronize with your PC. If you have Outlook, you can synchronize mail, contacts, calendars, and tasks, basically reminders. And you could synchronize your bookmarks from Safari on your iPhone and iPad with Microsoft Edge. Back when I made the slideshow, it was Internet Explorer. And then they also, if you don't have the Outlook, they recommend that you access your mail, contacts, and calendars and reminders at iCloud.com. And so this kind of opens up a whole world of possibilities. And so I want to talk about iCloud.com for a few minutes. It's available to access on a Mac or a PC. Really, I guess you could access it on something else. On an iPad, it used to be that you would have to go up and you would have to request the desktop version of the site. But in iPad OS 13, Safari automatically requests the desktop version of a website automatically. So when you go to iCloud.com, you don't have to do anything special anymore on an iPad. You can actually do this, and there is at least one reason to do this on an iPad, so I'll hopefully mention that in a little bit here. But basically at iCloud.com, if you have an iCloud.com email address, you can access your email through the web here, but everybody can access their notes, their contacts, their reminders, their calendars, pages, numbers, and Keynote documents. If you're using iCloud Photo Library, you can see your photos there. All those documents you've been saving in the cloud, including the desktop and documents folders if you've enabled that feature. If you're sharing your location with friends, or actually have friends sharing their location with you, you can access that from this service. And then there's a place where you can go into what they call settings, and kind of an important thing you can do there is you can recover accidentally deleted things, like maybe you got rid of some contacts. And if you go into iCloud.com within 30 days, you can go restore those deleted contacts or calendars or documents using iCloud.com. And last but not least, there's a Find My feature. They're still calling it Find My iPhone at iCloud.com. I noticed more recently on the iPhone and iPad and Mac, they're calling it Find My, because it's not just for finding the iPhone, it's for finding any of your Apple devices, including your iPad, your Apple Watch, your Macs. So anyway, all these things are available. And so we're going to get out of the slideshow again, and I'm going to head on over to Safari, although I could potentially access this through Google Chrome or Firefox as well. It's not Safari specific. And I'm just going to come up and go to www.icloud.com. More recently, they've made it to where if you're signed into your device that you're accessing this with your Apple ID, it will volunteer to sign in to iCloud.com with that Apple ID. I'm going to click the use a different Apple ID, even though I am using the one that's signed into this Mac, just to show you that process. Up in the upper right hand corner, there's a little question mark, and if you click that question mark, there's actually an iCloud user guide. So this is actually something you can access from help.apple.com/iCloud. But if you're on the iCloud.com website, you can click the little question mark and it will take you there. So anyway, this is where you're going to type in your email address. And then it's going to ask for your Apple ID password. And if you're accessing this for the first time from a device that has never been logged into your account, your other devices are going to pop up. And so, in fact, I'm going to switch over to the iPad here. The iPad has popped up as well, and it's saying someone is trying to get into my iCloud data. And I get the choice now of accepting or declining that event. So since I know it's me accessing this for the first time, I can come up and allow that. You'll only run into this if you're using two-factor authentication. But this is the reason Apple has introduced this extra layer of security is because if you're using iCloud, you potentially have a lot of very sensitive data stored in the cloud, including passwords to other accounts and things. So anyway, if I come back to the Mac now, I can type in that password or that code 216426, and so just type that in 216426. It now knows it's me. I could decide to trust this browser from now on so that I don't have to go through that process anymore. If this was my computer, if it's a public computer, you would say don't trust. And in my case, I'm just going to say don't trust it right now because in future classes I want to talk about two-factor authentication again. So anyway, I'll just say not now. So here are those apps that I was just talking about, at least most of them. The settings, they've now moved into this little icon right here. This is where you can go in and see what devices are signed into the account. You can also, down here under Advanced is where you can restore deleted files, restore contacts, restore calendars, restore bookmarks. If you think something is signed in to iCloud that you're not sure, if you just have doubt, you can sign out of any browser. So anyway, I'm going to go back to the top left-hand corner. Let me make this sidebar go away. I'm going to click on Settings. Here's all the other apps. And so if you've got iCloud.com email, you can actually send and receive email here. Addresses, this is something that I helped. In fact, I'm going to go over to Contacts on an iPad for a moment. On an iPad or a phone, you can see groups that you've created on your Mac, but you can't create groups. If I hit the little plus here, the plus is only for creating a new contact. So if you've got groups that you manage, you cannot do that on an iPad using the Contacts app. But you could come over to Safari and you could log into iCloud, and you could do what I'm doing here on this Mac. In the lower left, you could hit the little plus. Here you can make a new contact or a new group. Anyway, this is one of those things where iCloud.com comes in handy if you're trying to do this on an iPad, where you can create contact groups on an iPad. Calendar is fully functional. Let's see, I've got the iCloud class starting at 9:30. Next month we'll be doing this at, I think, 11 o'clock or maybe 5 o'clock actually. So I could take this calendar event here and actually move it and say, you know what, I just want to move this event to that time period. And so this is fully functional. You can create new events here. You can move events around. And so anyway, photos, you can see all of your photos if you're using the iCloud photo library. You can actually see all your albums. You can come up and create albums up at the top. You can upload photos. If you click a photo, you can download it to the computer that you're on. Let's come back over here. iCloud Drive. All your files that you've stored there are being kept in iCloud Drive. Up at the top here, I can upload files to the drive from a computer, download files. I can delete files. If you're using iCloud.com email, you could click a file and you could email that file to someone using the iCloud.com email address. And then you can also share files with other people from iCloud.com as well as from your devices. I'm going to skip through notes and reminders, but these are fully functional. Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. These are the apps on your Macs that came free with your Mac, came free with your iPad and iPhone, where you can do word processing, spreadsheets, and presentations. This is where you can see all those documents, but not just see them, you can actually work on them in the cloud. So if you're stuck somewhere without one of your devices, or without any of your devices, you can still access your documents, and you can pull them up, assuming you have fast enough internet, and you can actually modify the document. This is a document I made a while back on iCloud, and so I'm actually going to come up and click on its title up here. And today is the 16th, so I'm going to go ahead and just modify this. And I've got access to fonts over here on the left. It's one of the nicer, there's other apps that do this. I mean, Google Docs, I can't remember what they call it. You can work on documents in the cloud, but it doesn't look this good. It's not this elegant. So, if I click on a photo I've got over on the right, I can change to a different style of photo. I can click on a graphics element and change the gradient or whatever. So all these changes, especially if I close this document now, that document is being updated, and when I go access it again on one of my own devices, let's say I come down to Pages, and there's been a recent update to Pages, so it's telling me about that. If I go to the iCloud Drive and click on Pages, that's where my document is stored. I think it's this document right here. So let's see, there's the change that I made on the date. It hasn't actually updated the photo yet, but let me just mention this. This is actually a picture of the cloud. This is Steve Jobs, and this is the Apple data center in Maiden, North Carolina. There's that change. It just popped in with the change on the border of the photo, which I think I'm going to go and change back to the real reflection. So anyway, if you look up Maiden, North Carolina on the internet, you'll see this massive building. Inside the building is where our data is being kept. And then also next to the building, you'll see fields and fields of solar panels to power these things. So anyway, this is one of the places that Apple keeps our data if you're using iCloud. So anyway, this is synchronizing. I just made a change to that, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. This is synchronizing with the cloud and then to my different devices. I'm going to get out of Pages. I'm not going to go into Numbers and Keynote, but they're fully functional as well. If you're sharing your location with friends and you've lost track of one of them, you could actually go to a computer and log in and potentially find them. And I'm going to click on the Find iPhone feature, which for some reason they haven't updated this to be calling it Find My. On my Mac, they have changed the title of this to just Find My, and you'll see this icon on your iPhone and iPad as well. But in iCloud, it's still called Find My iPhone. They do make you type in your Mac password again, because this feature is pretty powerful. And it actually lets you do things like erase your device. So if you've lost control of something, let's say you lost your iPhone, and you really don't have any hope of getting it back, you could actually come in here and wipe all the data off of it so that, well, this is interesting. Two devices are online but cannot be located. Let's see. Let's go ahead and click up at the top where it says all devices. There's iPad Pro, online, no location available. I'm not sure why that is. It is online. So what I could do if I was missing the iPad is I could check the little box and notify me when found. Or I could try, even though it can't seem to find the location of it, I could try to make it play a sound. And you can see on my iPhone, on my iPad, there it goes, it's starting to make the sound. So even though iCloud.com can't seem to find the location of this, it did find it well enough to start making it make this dinging sound. So if you're missing a device, you can actually make it make a noise. I actually had to use this feature one time shortly after my wife and I got iPhones. Let me just show you on the map here. She was at a grocery store in North Asheville. I'll zoom in a little bit here. She set her iPhone down on a counter to pay for her groceries, and she walked out to the car without bringing her iPhone with her. And in the car, she realized that she had left the phone in there, so she just went back into the store and asked the cashier. And the cashier said, "Oh no, I asked the lady behind you if that was her iPhone, and she said no." And the lady behind her picked it up and walked out. So she called me, and I went over to a Mac. I was at work, so I went over to a Mac and logged into iCloud.com with her Apple ID, which I had just created a week before that. It turned out, the person that had done this had turned the iPhone off. So it looked like this. It didn't have a picture on the screen. It showed it completely offline, not just online, but not locatable. So my only options were to check this little box, notify me when found. And my wife did not have a passcode on her phone, which is not a great idea, but she didn't like typing it in every time she turned the phone on. So I was able to put, when you go into lost mode, if you don't have a passcode on it, you can put one on there. So I put a passcode on the phone. I checked the box that said notify me with found, and I went about my day. And about a half hour later, I got a notice that the iPhone had been turned on. So I went back over to the computer. We'll use another one here. Let's zoom out here. And the phone was over here in a different part of town. This was 7 years ago, and this was right before Apple had created their own Maps app, or it might have been right on the cusp of when they did that. And they hadn't implemented Apple Maps everywhere into all their products. So Apple is actually using Google Maps here. And so this is something that Apple says they're working on right now. They say they're working on floor plans of malls and airports. I'm sure they're starting with the bigger cities first. They do not actually have a floor plan of the Asheville Mall. But at the time, let's go to Google, and I'm going to do a search for Asheville Mall. And I'm going to pull up the Google map of the Asheville Mall, and we'll zoom in on that. They actually had a floor plan of the mall. It didn't have all these labels that it has now, but it had the basic outline of the walls and the stores and so forth. And there was a dot on the map right here. And I didn't know how accurate that was. I thought perhaps the person was going to try to sell the phone to a cell store, or maybe perhaps get a new SIM card and make it work for themselves. So I was kind of looking around trying to decide what could possibly be going on. And I called my wife and I let her know that the phone was at the mall. And for some reason, she decided she was going to go to the mall and see if she could figure this out. So she took her son over there with her. They stopped and got my phone to be able to make calls. So while she's looking for a security officer, my son has my phone and he's poking around in this area And I had my phone up on one Mac and her phone up on another Mac, and I was clicking the little refresh button on both of them. Her little dot was staying completely still, and his dot was kind of, when I would refresh, it would be in a slightly different position based on where he was. So at some point he said, uh-oh, I think I see what it is. And I'm going to open the Photos app here for a second, because he shared a photo with me, and I'm using a feature here that we'll talk about next week in the iCloud Photos class. He shared a photo with me. It's in an album called iPhone 4S, I believe. There it is, right there. This is the photo he emailed me, right here. It was a pretty good guess here. It says instant cache for phones, and I'm going to zoom in on the photo here. It's actually got an 800 number on it. It has a camera on it, so it would take a picture of the person that was doing the transaction. Had a fingerprint reader. It had a photo ID scanner. So they required a fair amount of information about the person that's getting the cash. That night, I called this number, and I said to the person that answered the phone, it says, I think our phone is inside your box. And they asked me for a number that I didn't really know much about at the time. It was called the IMEI number. And fortunately for us, we still had the box for the phone. And so I gave them this number. I was thinking they were going to ask me for the serial number, which would have worked if we had just had that, but it would have been a couple of weeks because they only have people pick up the phones every couple of weeks. But with this number, your phone can actually be identified on a cellular network. So this is how your cell phone company keeps track of your phone between all the other phones out there in the world. And so they said our security department will contact their security department, Verizon's security department, and we'll give you a call back tomorrow and let you know. So they did. They called me back the next day and they said, yes, your phone's in our box. If you will go to the mall and get a police officer, not just one of the security guys, but a police officer. And I did not know that there was basically a full-time policeman that worked only at the mall. And so we got the policeman, and they said we will open the box for him remotely once he gives us his badge number. We called the number, he gave the badge number, and click, the door opens, and there is, inside this very heavy enclosure, is a pile of phones. And so I went back, let me just go back to iCloud here. I actually went to the little app on the phone. I suppose I could switch over to the other view of the iPad here. And so when you go into that app on your device, it gives you a similar type of experience as what we're doing here at iCloud.com. So I went into the phone and basically made her phone make that dinging noise as well. So anyway, that enabled the police officer to identify her phone out of the pile of phones. And when I typed in the code for the phone that I had created there, that turned out to be proof enough for the police officer that that was our phone. So this feature, Find My Device, is an excellent feature. And even if you have no interest in sharing your data across devices, in my opinion, it's worth turning on iCloud just for that one feature, because it saved us about $450 back in the day for that iPhone 4S. All right, back to the slideshow. We've intimated about this before, talked about backup. This feature is pretty much only for the iPhone and the iPad. So it makes a complete backup of your device. With the only exception is music that you've downloaded from a computer. But basically it's backing up everything, and it's storing that backup in the cloud. So if you get a new device, or if you lose your device, gets stolen, you can at least go restore all the data from that device. In Sierra and above, so that would include Sierra, High Sierra, Mojave, Catalina, all have this feature called Desktop and Documents, the one that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so on a Mac, you do have those two, or at least you can choose to turn on that feature. On both the iCloud backup is also an optional thing. You get to decide if you want to do it or not. So on the Mac, you're backing up those two folders. It's not backing up your apps. It's not backing up all the additional things. It can be backing up your photos using the iCloud photo library, which we'll talk about next week. So it can be backing up photos, desktop documents, and the iCloud folder. But it's not backing up other folders like the downloads folder. It's not backing up your movies folder or your music folder or your home folder, things like that. So on a Mac, we still recommend that you use Time Machine. And so that's an app that makes a complete backup of your Mac to an external device. And it's still possible to back up your iPad and iPhone to previously it was the iTunes app. Now it's you actually back up to the Finder if you're using Catalina. But anyway, this just brings up the topic again of the amount of storage that you have on iCloud. They give you that 5 gigabytes for free. One note: they do not count against you anything you've purchased from Apple. So purchased music, purchased movies, purchased TV shows, all the apps that you have on your phone, all the books that you have in your Apple Books library, none of that counts against your storage. They already have that in their vast libraries, so they don't need to count that against your device. They also don't count against you one of the features that we'll be talking about next week called shared iCloud photo albums, or that is one little secret place that you can store photos that's not counting against you. But it does count your camera roll. If you're not using the iCloud photo library, your iPhone and iPad have a camera roll, so that's going into the backup. It's backing up all the data that you have on apps and iCloud Drive, so all the pages, numbers, and Keynote documents, and all the PDFs in the Books app, all the other things that you put in iCloud Drive or on the desktop in the Documents folders. That's getting counted against you. Text messages, starting with High Sierra, you can back up your text messages to the cloud, not just your cell phone company's texting service. In fact, they don't back up your messages. If you haven't been doing backups of your text messages into the iCloud backup, then when you get a new phone, those old text messages aren't going to be there. It will just be the ones going forward. So anyway, but now you can actually use the iCloud to back up the messages in a way that all your devices can access those text messages, not just your cell phone. So, and then it's also backing up the apps that you do have, how you have them organized on your home screen. And again, I think we've mentioned that the additional plans start at 99 cents a month. If you need more than the 50 gigabytes that you get with the 99 cents, the bigger plans you can actually share with family members. So I may have mentioned that I'm sharing the $2.99 plan with my wife and one of our children. So anyway, if you need to move to one of the bigger plans, those plans are shareable with other family members. Yeah, I'll just show you where that is real quick. I'm going to switch over to the iPad, and I'm going to go to Settings, tap my name, or in this case this is Johnny Appleseeds, tap iCloud, and then if you slide down towards the bottom of the first section, so again, all the things we've talked about, there's the little switch for turning on text messages, there's the little switch for turning on iCloud Keychain, which Johnny Appleseed doesn't want to be using actually. And then right below that is iCloud Backup. And so his last successful backup was actually a little while ago. Since his iPad is plugged in, it was asleep before I just switched over to it here. So it was actually able to make a backup of this iPad recently. So if I want to, I can force it to do another backup. It was just letting me know that I had turned off backup for one particular app. So it's going to make a backup of this iPad to the cloud. The very first one could take a while. This one's just backing up what's changed in the last hour, so it's going to happen very quickly. So that's where you turn that on. Let's just one or two more slides here. Want to mention another device, the Apple TV. First of all, the Apple TV and also the more recent HomePod. If you've got one of the HomePods, those two devices can be HomeKit hubs, which basically let you access your smart devices. So again, the smart locks, smart thermostat, smart fans, smart shades, smart light bulbs, all those things can be controlled when you're not at home. If you don't have an Apple TV or HomePod or iPad that's kind of sitting at home, then you can only control those devices when you're on the same Wi-Fi network as the devices. But if you've got an Apple TV sitting there, or a HomePod, or if you've got an iPad that's kind of stays at home all the time, you can actually control those things when you're away. So maybe you're 10 minutes down the road after you left home and you realize you forgot to turn the thermostat down. You could actually do that from your you could say, hey Siri, turn the thermostat down to 68. Or you could say, hey Siri, lock the front door, and it would still be able to do that using the whole iCloud sync and this little HomeKit thing. Of course, the Apple TV can play all the things you've ever bought from Apple. Movies, TV shows, music, things like that. And it can show all your iCloud photos. So again, we'll talk about that next week. But if you've turned on the iCloud photo library or you're using iCloud sharing, then you can access those photos on the Apple TV through the cloud without any of your other devices actually being present. So I think that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we've got a whole nother hour where we talk about the iCloud photos, and we'll talk about that in detail. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks and have a good day. Bye-bye.